I know. Good afternoon. It's a beautiful day in a beautiful place, and you are a beautiful crowd. You really are. I'm Ingrid Johnston Robledo, and I'm the Dean of Special Academic Programs. And one of my favorite responsibilities is to work with the first-year seminar faculty and students. I get to work really closely with some amazing faculty leaders and SOS, and I think that you should give them all a round of applause. This is a really dedicated group of people on our campus. So this year in the first-year seminar, we're working with the theme of curiosity and its role in your academic journey. We want you to approach your college education with a sense of curiosity, with eyes wide open, with a desire to indulge in this feast of opportunities that we have to offer. With that in mind, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce to you our first sounding speaker, Erik Shronstorm, who has just published the book, Wild Curiosity: How to Unleash Creativity and Encourage Lifelong Wondering. As he does in his book, he will inspire you to think about ways to mobilize your curiosity, to power your learning inside and outside of the classroom. Currently, Erik lives in Burlington with his family, where he is a writing professor at Champlain College. But before that, he held many different kinds of positions: a newspaper reporter, environmental consultant, a cook, a mentor for incarcerated youth, and even an apple tree pruner. His career path reflects a sort of purposeful serendipity, if you will. He's a role model for following your passions to create and seize new opportunities. We are delighted that he's here with us this afternoon to share his presentation entitled "The Radical Power of Curiosity and How to Embrace It." Please join me in giving him a warm Spartan welcome.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to try to... Don't let the applause die before I get to the stage, please. That's an awkward 10-step. No, I'm joking. You don't actually have to do it. So thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Ingrid, for that lovely introduction. It would help me a little bit to figure out sort of who's in the room. So I know that this is primarily first-year students, so we also have some transfer students, but really what I want to know is, can I see the hands of all the faculty, staff, and administration that's in the room, please? So we can get an idea of how many of them there are. Okay, good. That's important for me to know. So I know that we do have some transfer students, but most of you are first-year students here at Castleton, so I just want to say congratulations, welcome, and mainly congratulations on finishing high school. That's got to feel pretty good. It is a huge accomplishment that you should feel really happy about. And I feel like now is a good time and a safe space in this beautiful spot for us to go ahead and drop away the sort of false impressions that we tried to give you while you were in high school. As you all know, you had a moment in high school, and I think probably all of you had this moment where you asked yourself this question: do I really need to be learning this? Raise your hand if you had that moment. Raise your hand if you're having that moment right now. Put your hands down. Okay, good, good, good. That guy kept his hand up, so please, administration, keep an eye on that guy right there, okay? So yeah, you had that moment, and I want to let you know now, as a official representative of the adult grown-up college world, your suspicions were correct. It was true. You didn't have to learn some of that stuff. We just had to put you someplace when you were a teenager so you didn't set fires in trash cans and flip over cars. Like, we just had to have you doing something. Some of the stuff you learned was important, and some of that information will be valuable later on. Some of it won't, and you will have forgotten it. But regardless of that, congratulations, you finished and you're here at college. And this represents a pretty dynamic shift in your learning life at this point. Up to now, it's been about finding answers. You took tests, you took exams, and that was sort of the way that you were able to identify if you'd actually learned something, right? You'll still do some of that stuff, but now it's much more about questions rather than being about answers. So in college, you are in fact allowed to ask questions of your professors like, why are you teaching me this? Why are you teaching it in this way? I mean, do it politely, not like that guy who just like does, do it in a nice way, and your professors will want to engage in that conversation with you. It is no longer someone standing in front, even though I'm standing in front of the room now, so this is sort of a false impression. It's no longer someone doing that. It's you in conversation with people, trying to figure out what the best way to move forward is in your learning, in your life, and in your college career. It's a conversation. So it is a very different sort of experience than you've had thus far. So in trying to figure out the way that I could be the most useful for you today, what I thought I'd do is talk a little bit about learning, a little bit about curiosity, and a little bit about the way that we can think about the way in which we learn and how that affects where we end up. Before I start that, raise your hand if you know what you want to study and you feel pretty good about knowing where you want to end up after your 4 years. Wow! Wow! When I was your age, I could barely talk to other people. I was like still in the quagmire of the That's incredible. So it sounds like people have a really definitive plan. Ingrid was nice enough to say that my own journey has been purposeful serendipity, I think. That was a total lie. There was nothing purposeful about it. It was just me bouncing around like a random atom or something. I don't know. But what I want to do today is talk about 3 common sense statements or things we all kind of believe that are actually myths. So 3 things that you may have been told or you may yourself think, and these are things that I certainly at one time or another have believed to be true, but in fact, they may not be true, at least in the way that we think they are, okay? And these 3 common sense sort of ideas that are actually myths are these. Number 1, people are actually prepared and know what they're doing. That's a myth, okay? And not all the time, but we'll talk about why. Number 2, older, more experienced people have all the answers. Again, potentially a myth. While there are some people who are older and more experienced that have answers, not all of them. And then the third one, and this is the one that's going to be a little bit sticky, and I'm already up here, so I've made it this far, so I can say it. In college, you're going to learn some things. That's a myth, okay? So we'll talk about why those 3 things are myths, okay? But before I get there, let's talk about you. I'm going to describe a scenario, and then we'll see how many of you this sounds familiar. Now, this isn't going to be familiar for everyone, but I think it'll be familiar for some of you. Raise your hand if at some point during the past couple years of high school you've had to either write essays, write research reports, write a paper, write a book report, some sort of book review. Raise your hand if you've written something like that. Okay, great. Almost all of us, right? Let me guess how you did it. At least some of the time, and for some of you, all of the time. You waited till the last second. Yes? Okay, already heads are nodding. Probably at like 6:30 in the morning, or potentially the very morning it was due. Or even more potentially, if that's such an expression, after it was due, after you've begged your teacher for an extension. If this is sounding familiar, yep, we've already got some yeps. So you wait till the last second, and what you do is you get yourself like a weird antifreeze colored energy drink, something that looks like it could like melt steel, and you start pounding it, and you desperately start typing away at your computer something, anything, please, dear Lord, let me write some words on paper. You're sweating, maybe you're double fisting coffees and donut, right? Does it sound familiar? And then at the last second, you race to class, you hurl the paper on the desk, and you're so freaking relieved that you pulled it out. You feel good about yourself, oddly. You hand it in, you never think about that paper again, and really don't even care what grade you got because you're just so relieved and you just want to go hang out with your friends. If that sounds at all familiar to how you've written at least one paper in high school, raise your hand. The people with their hands not raised are probably lying, just so we're clear, okay? This is a safe space, okay? This is a safe space for us, so those people are liars because we've all done it. If you're a faculty or an administrative person in the room and you have done that, raise your hand. Okay. I feel so much better that we have that out in the open. And that's not an entirely useless skill to have, right? It's pretty good. Being able to do that at the last second, that actually works. But as we all know, the shelf life on that kind of learning may not be all that long. In fact, it's a pretty difficult experience, and it kind of wears us down. Let me offer you again, I feel like this is a safe space. I feel like we've already created connection here. This guy's already admitted he doesn't like me. So I feel like we've got a really good back and forth here. So let's go ahead and take this moment. Let's talk about this speech. I was asked to give this speech months ago, right? And what did I do? I procrastinated. just like mad, like you guys all did. I procrastinated. I mean, I was thinking how dumb I could look standing up here in front of all you guys if I totally screwed this up. How important it was that I try to give you, as you start out in your college journey, some useful piece of information. I didn't do anything about it, though. I just kind of sat there. I thought about it, but I didn't think it through, right? But then I realized, Erik, you are an author, a college professor. You are a Vermonter. I'm a Vermonter. You know, you've got to represent sort of the finest way to think about things and to prepare for academic experience as possible. So I did what you all did, which is I went on YouTube. That was a joke, by the way. Some of you looked at me like I was serious. It is not. But I went on YouTube and I started searching great orientation or convocation day speeches. Nothing. I looked for really moving speeches to make at the beginning of a person's college career. Nothing. I couldn't find any. But there were tons of speeches coming up about commencement, about graduation from college. And so that got me curious. It got me thinking about something. We place a lot of cultural importance, a lot of emphasis on finishing school. And in fact, some of those speeches were really moving. There were ones by Maya Angelou. Obama gave one. Oprah, Ellen. 3 people that you can call with only one name, which is interesting. David Foster Wallace, Neil Gaiman, all these people gave these incredibly moving, rich commencement and graduation speeches. And they all talked about a very similar idea. They all said at some point or another within the speech, get ready to start out in the real world. Now your life begins, right? That was sort of the message for people finishing college. I thought that that was kind of crappy, and I actually don't really agree with that, because if that's true, then what have you been doing up till now? And what is this? So to my mind, what I want to do today is get across this idea, and maybe we can agree on it together. Your life has been going on for a long time. You've had experiences. You've had learning experiences that now, here, you can begin to reflect on. You can begin to identify what about it was useful and what about it was not useful, and you can begin to use it to identify how you learn. So let's talk more about me. As I didn't know necessarily what to say about starting your college career, about curiosity, I was experiencing a state known as ambiguity. Ambiguity is when you don't know. Ambiguity is when you have gaps in knowledge that need to be filled. And today, what I'd like to get across is that that is a rich, exciting, valuable place to be. Not knowing, being confused, being lost, not knowing what to think. Ambiguity is one of the places where curiosity takes root. If you're constantly distracted, if you're constantly engaged, and you constantly have this very fixed path, it doesn't give a lot of room for curiosity, which is not to say you shouldn't have a fixed path and goals. Obviously, you should. Bless you. But ambiguity is a place where curiosity can take root. And curiosity, ultimately, is one of the most powerful motivators of learning, but it's not going to be in the way that you think. Even though it's written into all kinds of schools and programs, sort of literature, their marketing materials, curiosity doesn't work that way. It's not very friendly as an institutional tool, and we'll talk about what that means. But ambiguity, it's when we don't know, and that's where curiosity comes from, okay? So there's 2 types of curiosity. There's lots of types, but we're going to talk about 2 right now. I type and D type. I stands for interest, D stands for deprivation, okay? Curiosity based on interest is me sitting there wondering, why do all these commencement speeches start talking about the fact that we start our lives after college when aren't we living right now? Isn't this a valuable experience? And then D-type means deprivation. That's you, early in the morning, chugging energy drinks, trying to write your paper in a sweaty panic. That's curiosity based on deprivation. Which one sounds to you like the more valuable type of curiosity? When you're here at Castleton over the next 4 years, if you look for that I-type, which is going to ask your professor during their office hours, look, I get what you're asking in the paper, but what I'm thinking of doing is something like this. How would that work? That's what I-type curiosity represents. That D-type stuff doesn't have a long shelf life. It can really wear you out, which is not to say it's not useless. It's still useful sometimes. You've got to do it, right? So that first truth that everybody knows what they're doing, it doesn't necessarily ring true, and here's the final thing I'll say about that. If you let yourself live in a place of ambiguity, in a positive way, you're going to be constantly curious and constantly looking for those answers that you want to have, okay? You're going to always be exploring. You're not going to be this know-it-all, because really, know-it-alls are the kinds of people that accept those sort of common truths that we're dismantling today, right? What you want to be is someone who's constantly questing for new questions, for new situations to explore. That's who you want to be. And part of that means accepting ambiguity into your life, accepting being lost, accepting not knowing what the answer is, okay? All right. Second myth. Old people who are more experienced, maybe have more life under their belt, have all the answers. This is something that's sometimes true. There are people out there who have lived a long life and who have had lots of experiences that do know more than we do, right? Or than we. I count myself as one of you. No, than you do, right? So let's see if that's true. What I'd like is a show of hands for who knows the answers to any of the 3 questions I'm about to ask, okay? Number 1, what is the only snake species to live north of the Arctic Circle? If you know that answer, raise your hand. I see no hands. Number 2, which reptile is an invasive species in the Florida Everglades that is currently upsetting the ecological balance? We've got some hands up. All right, some people know the answer to that. And number 3, what is the name of the largest snake that has been discovered thus far on the fossil record? Raise your hand. We've got a few more hands up. All right, now that was easy. Put your hands down if you're a student. Faculty, staff, and administration, if you know the answers to any of those 3 questions, raise your hand. Here we have all these PhDs and incredibly smart people who don't know. You know who does know? My 8-year-old kid. My 8-year-old son could answer those questions in a heartbeat. Why? He can answer them because he rates highly in something called epistemic curiosity. He also rates highly in something called being a pain in the ass, but he's also very curious, right? He's a kid. He can't help it. So he rates very high in something called epistemic curiosity. Here's what epistemic curiosity means. It means that I-type curiosity, just being interested in what interests you for the pure sake of enjoyment. Okay? This is a great place to be if you're trying to learn, because that's what you want to do. You don't want to be interested in things that tell you to be interested about. For instance, many of you were probably not terribly epistemically curious about coming here to see me today. It's a beautiful day, and there's nothing worse than an 18, 19-year-old and being stuck inside listening to some dude in their 40s on a beautiful day. Am I right? Don't answer that, okay? So you're here, and you may not be epistemically curious, but if you allow your epistemic curiosity to lead your learning, you're going to get to places that are ultimately fulfilling for you. You're going to get to places that are much more enriching to your own experience, and you're going to feel better than if you follow curiosity from a deprivation state, from a place where you feel like you need to know. Yes? Okay. So what we see here is that, in fact, older people may have some answers, but they also may be in states of ambiguity. More experienced people may have answers, but they may be those common sense truths. And it doesn't mean just because they're older or more experienced, they necessarily have the answers. Maybe you will follow your epistemic curiosity and know the answers to those 3 snake questions, which are, by the way, the European viper is the only snake to live north of the Arctic Circle. The Burmese python is currently upsetting the balance of the Florida Everglades. And the Titanoboa is the name of the largest snake fossil specimen ever found. So, has anybody parked or been through that parking lot over there? The one sort of the visitor parking lot? Has anybody seen the weird little domed-shaped thing on the side of it? Raise your hand if you saw it. Okay. About half, maybe a third of the room has seen it. Raise your hand if you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay. So why do some of us notice it? Because it looks like maybe it's an old observatory, or maybe the home of an angry troll who bites your ankles if you park in the wrong place. I don't know. Maybe the world's smallest grain silo. I'm not sure what it is. But why do some of us notice it and some of us don't? People that notice it, and this is very unscientific, obviously, they may rate high in something called perceptual curiosity. Perceptual curiosity is where you are motivated to investigate visual stimuli and go figure out what it is, right? Maybe you were like this in school. Maybe you were the kid who sat in class while the teacher was talking, or the guy in his 40s was talking about curiosity, and you just couldn't help but notice other stuff. Birds flying by, cars in the parking lot, some dude walking by on the sidewalk. If you were one of those people, you may be highly perceptually curious. Now think about that. If you're the kind of person who notices the dome, if you're the kind of person who picks up on visual stimuli, and you decide that you're going to be a programmer and make $1 million coding for Microsoft someday, and you're going to be stuck in a basement cubicle coding your life away, that may not be the best job choice for you, because you're someone who would be better suited, like my son maybe, out in the jungles trying to find new snake species, right? So we have to think about the ways in which we engage with our surroundings and what that means for our own curiosity. Does that make sense? So far we've got epistemic, which is learning what you want to learn because you want to learn it. And we've got this idea of perceptual curiosity, picking up on visual cues. There's different ways in which we learn. So I feel like this is a pretty safe place. And so one of the things I want to ask right now, and I want you to be honest, is who's bored? It's okay, be honest. Who's bored? You can, no, just say it. You can say it. One hand was like shot up before I even got to the ed in bored. That was incredible. So, okay, so fine, you're bored, big deal, I don't even care, okay, whatever. But if you are bored, just so you know, that's another place where curiosity can take root. Boredom, lack of distraction, lack of an agenda. So those of you that were bored, I would be curious to know what you were thinking of while you were bored instead of thinking about what I'm saying. I genuinely mean that. I'm sure it was probably pretty weird and interesting because you are 18, 19 years old. Maybe I don't want to know. I'm sure. Never mind. It's probably disgusting. Never mind. But if I were to ask you, I'm sure it would represent something about yourself that was kind of interesting, and so maybe I would want to know, right? So I'm a little bored listening to myself too, to be honest with you. I do this frequently, so let's not listen to me talk anymore. And here's what I'd like you to do. And I should point out that whenever I do this, my wife, who is somewhat of an introvert, always tells me, Eric, this is the worst thing you can do to people. You need to be respectful of people who maybe aren't socially activated and may not want to do this. And I agree that it is painful and it does cause discomfort, but I want to point out that this is college where pain, discomfort, social, intellectual, and otherwise are going to be the name of the game the whole time you're here, so we may as well start now, okay? So here's what I'd like you to do, is instead of being bored by me, and I have memorized already all the people that raised their hands, and we'll be reporting your names to the administration, just so you know. Instead of being bored by me, talk to each other. Here's what I want you to do. I'm sure you kind of filed in here with someone that you sort of glommed onto in your first few days of college. We all glom, right? We're like, I know this person, and we sort of walk around with them. I want you to turn around, or face forward, or to the side, or whatever, and look at someone that you don't know, and I want you to talk to them for 1 minute. Just 1 minute. And here's what I want you to talk about. Not yet. Don't start yet. You can talk about whatever you want. Whatever you want. You can talk about how Ryan Lochte is such a turd. You can talk about my bad clothes. 1 minute, talk to someone you don't know. Go. Okay, bring it to a close now. Wind up your conversation. I think we just made some love connections, by the way. I was watching up here. There was some palpable stuff going on out there. That was good. Now help each other out if you must, with a show of fingers. Think about the conversation you just had with one or more people, and here's what I want to know. How many questions did you ask about other people? So you may have sat there and just been like, well, I come from blah, blah, and you may have just talked about yourself, which is fine. I do that all the time. But how many questions did you ask about other people? Think in your head. Think back on your conversation, use your fingers, maybe turn to the person you talked to and say, did I ask you three, four? Try to figure it out. How many people out there asked 0 questions? Got a couple? How many people asked 1 question? A couple of us asked 1. How many people asked 2? How many people out there during your conversation with 1 or more people asked 3 or more questions? Wow. Of course you did, because you may be highly interpersonally curious. And no one is more interpersonally curious than young adults and adolescents, right? You want to know about it. That's your whole deal. The whole time you're sitting here, you're thinking about social stuff. You may even, in fact, be on your phone texting about social stuff right now. In fact, I know you are, because it actually looks like you're smiling, laughing, and talking to your own crotch from my perspective. Just so we're clear. Just so we're clear, that's what I'm seeing is this. Oh my God, I can't believe that. It's kind of gross, just so you know. So that's what I see when you do that, okay? Try not to do that. So if you ask more than 3 questions, you may be interpersonally curious. That means that you get your information about the world that you learn through talking to other people. Now ask yourself this question, those of you that raised your hand with such surety that you knew what you wanted to study and kind of what you wanted to do after school. If you are also highly interpersonally curious, and let's say you want to go work in an engineering lab, sort of just very meticulously working out some gizmo or widget, but you're also highly interpersonally curious, how are those two going to mesh? If you're highly interpersonally curious, maybe you should start thinking about things like teaching or being a reporter or all kinds of other things where you're engaged with people, working in politics, who knows? But out there dealing with people, because that's how your own curiosity enacts itself in your life. That's how you feel fulfilled. What sort of curious person are you? So we have epistemic, learning about snakes just because you want to learn about snakes, right? We have perceptual, picking up on visual cues that are around us because we just can't help ourselves. That's another kind of curiosity. And we also have this final one called interpersonal, which does one more thing, okay? You have all spent the past 48 hours or however long, 24 hours, kind of figuring out this college scene, and you've spent much of that time, including the past minute, thinking about other people. When you engage in your interpersonal curiosity, when you really think about it, it actually increases empathy. It increases compassion. It increases understanding of the other with a capital O, which I'm sure you will hear about at some point here in your college career. That's pretty essential to leading a fulfilling, good life, is having empathy for other people. One of the surest ways to develop that empathy, to understand someone who doesn't come from where you come from, doesn't have the same experiences or culture you do, is through engaging with your interpersonal curiosity. Now, I want to remind you that curiosity is not easily codified by education. It's impulsive, it's transient, and it just comes and goes whenever it wants to, okay? It's intense. You've got to remember those pieces of curiosity because they are, in fact, the way that curiosity manifests itself. If you find yourself desperately wanting to talk to this one person about this one thing that you've been thinking about, that's the moment to notice, wait, is this interpersonal curiosity? Am I deeply curious about this because I want to fulfill this knowledge gap, I want to figure this out? Be aware of those sorts of scenarios because they're important, okay? So, I think we can kick it up a notch because some people are still staring at their crotch. So let's do this. I have something that I don't normally do, but I want to give it a try today because you're young, you're fit, and let's give it a shot. First of all, before I ask you this question, I just want to know how many of you out there are willing to engage in risky experiences that might cause bodily harm? How many people feel sort of confident that they're willing to engage in something that might be a little physically... Okay, hands down. Okay, so we all saw how many, right? So let me explain it to you, and then we'll see if you still want to do it, okay? And I will ask for some volunteers in a second. I have a blindfold up under this podium, okay? And I've put these two tables they're about 6 feet apart, 8 feet apart, something like that. What I'd like to do is I'd like to get a volunteer. I'm going to bring that volunteer to the front. I'm going to put the blindfold on them, and then I'm going to spin them around in a circle 10 times. And then if I could get a few other volunteers, we're going to help them up onto that rickety folding table, okay? Then, only by listening to the sound of my voice and my directions, that person is going to back up to one end of the table, run to the other end, leap off, and land on the other table, all blindfolded. Can I see a show of hands for who would like to try that? Take a look. Are you insane? I'm not actually going to do that. You don't know me. I could be a crazy... What are you... Put your hand down. Why would I do that? You could break your leg. Raise your hand if you raised your hand just a second ago. Take a look at these people. Administration, write down their names. These people have issues with danger and risk. Don't ever raise your hand for something. This guy still is raising his hand. Even though I said I'm not doing, he's like, no, I think we could try it. I think we got it. He's like, no, bro, I can nail it, bro. Just give me a chance. If you raise your hand the first time, yeah, I'll give something a try. And then especially if you raise your hand the second time, not only do you need to seriously begin to assess the choices you make in life, which is fine, but you also may rate high in our last bit of curiosity, which is called sensory curiosity. This is related to a psychological construct known as sensation seeking, right, developed by a guy named Zuckerman. Basically what it means is you don't figure out the world through intellectualizing necessarily those sort of epistemic curiosity things. You don't figure out the world through perception, through looking. You figure out the world through putting your body into risky, sometimes slightly physically risky situations and seeing what you can learn about yourself, about the world, and the people around you. Sensory curiosity. It's a pretty amazing aspect of learning that we don't talk about a lot, right? We just don't revisit those ideas enough, that we have all these different ways of learning. So what I'd like you to do now is I'm actually going to ask you to turn to each other again, maybe a different person this time, okay? I want you to think about yourself and remember that none of us are just one type of curiosity, right? We have perceptual, epistemic, sensory, what was the fourth one? There was like 3 voices, okay? It was like 10 minutes ago. Interpersonal, right? Think about yourself. What kind of curiosity engages itself in your life? Think about it, and I want you to turn to someone and take a minute and ask them, and then have them ask you, where do you think your curiosity lies? Let's have a quick conversation with each other. Again, 1 minute. Go ahead. Okay. How'd that go? That feel good? We get somewhere with that? So, you obviously have all kinds of different curiosity traits. We all do. And you have them all in varying degrees. But probably in that conversation, you recognized yourself, you may have, more clearly in one than the other. So let me ask you this. Raise your hand if you feel like epistemic curiosity, where you just want to learn what you want to learn because you want to learn it, not because there's some reward out there, not because someone's telling you to. You're just interested in the things you're interested in, regardless of how much it's going to bore the people across the table at dinner. You're just going to talk about it anyway. If you're sort of epistemically curious, raise your hand. All right. Pretty good part of the room. What about perceptual curiosity? How many of you out there are really good at picking up on visual cues and really want to investigate them? Raise your hand for perceptual curiosity. All right, looks like about a quarter of the room. And then what about interpersonal curiosity, where you really want to discover the world and discover about yourself and other people through talking with other people? Raise your hand if you were sort of interpersonal. All right. And then the final one, and again, take note of these people. Sensory curiosity, where you really want to explore the world through risk, through putting your body into sketchy situations. Raise your hand if you are sensory. All right, great breakdown. Okay? So here's what I'd like you to do. I don't want the students to raise their hand, but I want to talk to the faculty administration. And students, I want you to take note. Because as I said at the beginning of this, college is uniquely different than what you've experienced in education thus far. It's about questioning. It's about taking different approaches to understanding information. It's not about necessarily sitting in the room, listening to a person tell you how it should be. It's about you engaged in conversation, trying to figure out how it could be. So, faculty, staff, and administration, if you are an epistemically curious person, and I'm sure many of you are, that just studies what they want to study because they want to study it, raise their hand. If you feel like that fits you as sort of the main trait. All right, so we've got the epistemically curious. Faculty and staff, what about perceptual curiosity? You dial in on visual cues. We've got a few more. And then what about interpersonal curiosity, faculty, staff, and administration? And obviously a few of those. And then finally, and this is the teacher, by the way, who's going to take you in a van to go like skiing at Smuggler's Notch for physics or something like that. What about sensory curiosity? Do we have any sensory curiosity? All right, we've got a couple of them. Take note of who they are, right? So ultimately, college is about new things, right? It's about new experiences. It's about new people. It's about new smells. How many people have smelled a smell they've never envisioned smelling before in their dorm room thus far? Her hand shot straight up. She was like, yes. Don't go into how or whatever. Right. All kinds of new experience. That's called novelty. And seeking novelty is a really, really powerful way to learn. You're seeking new information. Yes? You're looking for things that you have not defined or investigated before. This is an incredibly important part of learning. If you're someone who seeks novelty, you generally speaking move through learning in a way that's fulfilling and feels rich and invigorating. So novelty is a good thing, but distraction may not be. Remember back when I asked if you were bored and some of you raised your hand? That was a gift I gave you by being a little bit boring, because boredom is a rich, incredible place where a psychologist named Fowler discovered that that's where curiosity can come from too, by being bored, by just not really being into the thing, and we start looking around. And so those little interstitial places in our lives, when you go to get your oil change, you're sitting there at Jiffy Lube, and like you forgot your phone maybe. I hope you forgot your phone. Be a good moment to forget it. And you're sitting there and the magazine's kind of stinking, you just look out the window. That can actually be a really, really rich time where you start tapping into ideas and ways of thinking that you don't normally have access to because we're so distracted scrolling through Tinder looking for someone hot, right? That's just, wow. So that's it. That's what gets the response. Okay, I see what I'm dealing with here. All right, let's change tack. Okay, so novelty is really important, but in order to access those new ideas, we really need to allow ourselves to live in ambiguity and to be bored. Let's review, okay? Epistemic, sensory, interpersonal, and perceptual. Good. Curiosity is intense, right? Curiosity is transient, and curiosity is impulsive. You can't dial into when it's going to happen. It's just going to sort of mow you down like a freight train, and you just got to jump on and grab on for dear life. And that's okay. Recognizing that is important. Ambiguity is that place of unknowingness that's so rich and important. Let me ask you this. How many people remember all three answers to the snake questions? Raise your hand. Right. So let's get to our third common sense statement that is actually kind of untrue, or that at least we need to modify. In college, you're going to learn some things. Well, I just gave you the 3 answers like 25 minutes ago, and almost everybody has forgotten all of them. How many people remember one of them? How many people remember 2 of them? And how many people remember all 3? All right, we got a couple. But we had like maybe 6, 7, 8 people who remembered all 3, and I just told you 20 minutes ago. So if you can't remember that, how are you possibly going to remember all the different little things that you learn in college while you're here? The fact is you won't. So what are we here for? And this is the part where I come up to the really cheesy cliche bit. But cliches are cliches because they're usually true. And here's the deal with learning in general, college especially, but learning in general. It's not necessarily about learning things, information and facts, though that happens too in a really great way. It's really about learning about yourself and other people. And at the core of that lies understanding your curiosity, how it is that you learn, why it is you learn the way you do. Look, not all of us can sit in an Algebra 2 classroom in high school and learn as the teacher puts equations and theories up on. We can't all do that. And yet, that's the expectation up to this point. But you're in a different place now. You get to decide what to learn. You get to decide who you want to have as your teacher. Within reason. You get to figure out how exactly you're going to advance on this learning journey that you're on. There is no better place to be. So in order to do that and do that in a way that's going to be fulfilling and exciting for you, you've got to touch base with those different types of curiosity, with those different ideas you have spinning around your head, and let them come to life. So, out of curiosity, how many of the faculty, staff, and administration remember all 3 snake bits? Let's do that. Let's have some honesty here. Say, wow, look around, students. No hands that I can see are really up. So, right, oh no, there was one back there, sorry. So we all forget them. I forget them. I have them written down right here, so I get to cheat. But we all forget them. My 8-year-old would remember them. So those are our 3 common sense truths that I think we've done a good job of looking at that may not be exactly true in the way that we usually understand them. So as we sort of get to the end of my bit here, and so I don't actually have sunstroke on this stage right now, there was a discussion as to whether or not it would be okay to wear shorts. Clearly, the answer was yes, I should have worn shorts. I want to bring up a very grim truth. This is just data. This is a fact. So this isn't one of those common sense truths that we just sort of accept that aren't really true. This is actually true. Across the nation, about 60% of students graduate within 6 years. 60%, 60. What that means is that 2 out of every 5 students within 6 years don't graduate. That's a statistic you can find anywhere, every major publication. So think about that. And of course, there's a million reasons why people's learning journeys may hiccup. There's a million reasons why they may sort of drift off. Could be family stuff, could be illness. You all know, as I said, your life doesn't start when you graduate. You've been living your life for a long time, and you know very well that life has been going on, right? And things can happen. Could be money, who knows? But I would also like to toss out this idea to you today, is that it's also possible that students get to a place of deep, sort of soul-sucking ambiguity, of feeling very lost, feeling outside of everybody else's experience, of not being sure if you're doing the right thing, of not feeling entirely confident and entirely absolutely sure that you're in the right place at the right time and learning the right things. I think that that's probably true. And here's what I think. If you're in touch with your curiosity and you really recognize how ambiguity, that not knowingness, is actually a good place to be, a rich place to be, that sort of confusion that you feel, that sort of unknowingness, that sort of Dantean being lost in the woods is actually a rich, invigorating place to be, I think you can make it. I think that you can navigate those times of unknowingness. I think that you can figure out how your curiosity can lead you out of that place and take you somewhere better. I think that it'll work. And I think that a lot of people get to a certain point in their college career and they don't know how to deal with the ambiguity. But you can. Because there are going to be times where your dorm mate keeps you up all night, and that's fine. There are going to be times where you get so bored here in the state of Vermont. Most of you are Vermonters, but you get so bored, you're not going to know what to do with yourself. You know, very briefly, I had a student named Max at Champlain who got so bored that he started combining whatever 2 menu items someone would recommend to him. The last one was tuna salad with chocolate ice cream. He did this in February, and I think it's not a random coincidence, because you guys know what Vermont winters are like, right? February gets dark, there's like 2 hours of daylight a day. You just cry yourself to sleep it's gonna be ugly. Your roommate's gonna look like a pale vampire, just, like all greasy. That's Vermont in February. We're all just going to deal with it and be there together, okay? So put some chocolate ice cream on tuna salad and just see what happens, okay? Novelty seeking. But my point is simply this. He sought out new experiences. Is that one that you necessarily should? No, but he did fine. He made it through. When we get to those places of ambiguity, we need to allow our curiosity, even if it's about putting chocolate ice cream on tuna salad, to lead us to some place that's new, some place that's exciting. And if we do that with our learning, we are going to be successful. Yes? So, 2 last bits for you. One of the first questions I asked is, how many of you know what you want to study and what you want to do? And 1,000,000 hands went up, and that's great. I'm so happy that you sort of have figured that out, and I hope that it works for those people that did. Some of you didn't raise their hands. So what I'd like to offer is this, last bit of sort of researchy stuff that we can talk about. There's 2 kinds of goals, extrinsic and intrinsic. Extrinsic goals are things outside of yourself. Intrinsic are things inside yourself. This is what the research has shown us. An extrinsic goal would be like, I want to get like a sick Audi A4 with like rims and like drop it and like look really good, right? That's an extrinsic goal, okay? An intrinsic goal is really more about your curiosity. I want to just learn what I want to learn because I want to learn it because I'm epistemically curious. An intrinsic goal is, I want to try to develop my interpersonal curiosity so that I can come to understand this person better, or I can come to understand this country better. So here's what the data shows. People who are extrinsically or outside of themselves, externally motivated, do not succeed at the same rate as people who are intrinsically motivated, internally motivated. So what is your motivation? This isn't a motivational speech at all, but what motivates you? Are you thinking about those external goals, or are you thinking about your own learning, about the things that get you fired up to learn? If you're not thinking about those things that get you fired up to learn, it might be a good time, I can't think of a better excuse than going to college, to start exploring those things, to start looking at those things that get you fired up and using those to guide your pathway. This is the place to do it. Again, this isn't compulsory high school anymore. You get to choose. This is your journey. And so you get to figure out what it is that makes you feel good about yourself and makes you feel fulfilled, and ultimately leads you to a place where you're in the driver's seat of your own life. Because remember, your life doesn't start in 4 years, despite what the commencement speeches tell you. Your life has already started. Now is your chance to catch up with it. So, I hope, what do I hope for you in your 4 years here at Castleton? I hope you have a wild, uncertain time. I hope that the next 4 years that it takes for you to get through this is filled with ambiguity, like soul-shaking ambiguity, and I hope you navigate it. I hope you make your way through it to a better, richer, more fulfilling place, and I think that you will if you allow curiosity to be the guidepost to let you do so. So, may you be bored. May you not distract yourself by talking to your own crotch. And may you change your mind 1,000 times over your college career. Thanks so much for having me, you guys. It was a blast.